structure of a lesson plan may also vary, and so a teacher will take many of those steps or moves or routines, but alter them somewhat to meet the needs of the learners in the context that they're teaching in. For example, what is the age and ability level of the students? If you are teaching beginner level students or intermediate level students or advanced students, the pace of the activities you do may vary as much as the activities that you actually do. The time of the day of the class will also influence how you structure a lesson. If you teach the same level of learner in the morning versus in the afternoon versus in the late afternoon or early evening, you may find that you need to do more perky activities at the beginning because you need to keep everybody motivated. The duration of the class will also impact the structure of a lesson. After all, a 20-minute lesson, 30-minute lesson, 45-minute lesson, 66-minute lesson, 88-minute lesson requires the teacher to structure activities in a very different way. Gender distribution may influence how you structure your lesson. Having more of one gender or another influences examples or the amount of activity that you might engage a class in. The class or group interest in a subject will also influence the structure of a plan. If you teach two groups of students, both at the same grade level, both in the same subject area, you can find that one group seems to be far more interested in that subject area and that you're always completing more than you would be with the other group, and wondering, why is that so? Finally, where the lesson falls in the context of a larger unit of instruction will also influence the actual structure of that lesson. A lesson that comes at the beginning of a unit of instruction might have more teacher talk, more explanation, more contextualizing. A lesson that comes in the middle will offer perhaps more practice or review activities, setting the stage for other activities to come. And a lesson that comes at the end of a unit may see more student reporting or more assessment of learning. There are many other things that have to be thought about, and we'll see that definitely more sophisticated and advanced teachers, because they have more experience, will be thinking of those things. But for all levels at this point in a beginner teacher's career, it's safe to say that you need to develop a daily routine. As soon as the students enter the class, you have to help them transition into the use of the target language. How can you do that? Greetings in that target language, perhaps having an activity on the board that students begin upon entering, a kind of do now, will help the students begin to be thinking in that language. Setting an agenda on the stage or on the board, which will describe the activities of the day, will also help make that transition. Informal chatting with students or beginning with a personal anecdote in the target language also helps to make that transition. The bulk of a lesson should be learning time. And again, depending on how long that lesson is, will depend on how much learning time is accessible. Most lessons will end with some kind of a summary about the homework tasks and a little farewell. When we think about daily lesson plans, there are many things that we can focus on, but for now, there are certain basics that a teacher has to realize that must be a part of one's thinking. So to really learn about planning, we have to go into detail. Details such as, what will you do and why will you do it? How does what you're doing aim at a longer term goal? That longer term goal could be the end of the unit, or it might be the end of several units, or the end of the whole semester. With time, you'll learn to plan backwards and choose and sequence activities. So those activities are important, and you want to sequence them, but you always want to be thinking about why you are doing those activities. Break them down into steps, chunk them, and then scaffold them, and learn to get a better sense of how long it takes to do different things. When we scaffold, we're really applying Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. That is, we're thinking about what someone can achieve on their own and what someone can achieve with the assistance of capable peers, whether that's other students or the teacher. So you're scaffolding the activities in your lesson, thinking about what should I do first and how can that be a foundation for something else. And that foundation is your decision as a teacher to provide that form of support. Scaffolding means slowly introducing texts or tasks with more and more words or with more and more cognitively demanding structures so that a student can achieve something more challenging with time. Now that you've thought about the activities you're going to do, have a sense of the time each is going to take, sequence them, i.e. scaffolded them, you must still answer why. Why did you scaffold them in that order? Why not something else? Why? Again, we move to the need for details. Now, as you've looked at those activities, you want to go into more granularity and think about what will you say? What will you do at the same time as you're saying something? Why are you planning to say that in that way and not something else? When we think about the language a teacher would use with a beginner learner versus a more advanced learner, we realize that with beginner learners, a teacher would be far more selective of the words and repeat instructions in the same way. Whereas once your learners are more advanced, you can use more synonyms and say things in a greater variety of ways. What will you do and how will what you do coordinate or correspond with what you're saying? It's very important that if you're asking students to read the blackboard, that you point to the board at the same time. And so it's not just pointing, but pointing as you say something. So simultaneously, you're thinking, why will you not do something? And always having good reasons for that. So now we've got a lesson that involves activity, scaffolding, the time it takes, what the teacher is saying, what the teacher is doing, and why. And looking across horizontally, you want to see that all of those things line up. More detail now as you focus on the student. What do you expect the students to be doing and saying as they are watching you, as they are listening to you, and why would you expect them to be doing or saying that and not something else? Now, the beauty is that students are going to be full of surprises and say things that you don't always expect. But as a beginner teacher, it's good for you to be thinking about what you're anticipating, because that is what is determining your next step. As you can see, all of the things that you're thinking about is expanding over time. What the teacher says, what the teacher does, what the students say and what the students do, and all of the whys. When we condense this into a lesson plan, this is the whys begin to come together. But at the same time, you have to also be thinking about assessment. When are you going to assess? And make sure that's a part of the activity scaffolding. How you're going to assess, for learning or of learning, and make sure that that enters into what the teacher says and does and what the students say and do. So, what will this lesson plan look like? Well, you want to have your activities in sequence. You want to have a sense of the time that you think it's going to take to do them, what you will do, what you will say, what the students will do, what the students will say, and accumulate all of the whys for each of those columns into a why column. Final tip. Check with your curriculum guide or program of studies regularly to ensure simultaneously that you're covering your legal mandate. And with time, this checkup will remind you of what you still